All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Hi, my name is Ariam Mogos, and I lead emerging tech initiatives at the Stanford D School. And I am thrilled to be moderating this really important discussion on stakeholder and community engagement in the development of AI products and systems. And as part of our panel, we'll be hearing from a couple of amazing folks today. I want to introduce Stephanie Kaufman, who leads product for TalkingPoints. Dr. Sarah Gripshover, Director of Educational Research that Scales, also known as PERTS. And I want to get right into it. So maybe we can hear from first Sarah and then Stephanie. Tell us a little bit about your organization and how AI integrates with your work.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So PERTS is an edtech nonprofit. We're focused on measuring and improving student experiences. So we were founded at Stanford University in the psychology department many years ago, and our focus is on the psychological contributors to learning. So we know that we learn more when we feel that our belonging is not in question, when we're treated with respect, when we have learning experiences that feel meaningful, not like busy work, and when we receive growth-oriented feedback. And so, we've been kind of working on these, we call them learning conditions, for many years. And our platform offers data dashboards and recommendations for continuously improving these learning experiences. But now in 2024, 25, 26, generative AI offers amazing opportunities for helping educators read and interpret data, and decide on appropriate actions to take and really understand the impact of those actions. So that's kind of why we're in the AI game now. And yeah, that's what we're up to.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. And then maybe we can go over to Stephanie and hear a little bit more about your work.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I'm Stephanie. I work for an edtech nonprofit called TalkingPoints. TalkingPoints, our mission is to drive student success by unlocking the superpower of families to fuel their children's learning. And so we have really focused for the past 10 years on ensuring that we can help schools and districts build trusting relationships with families, be able to reach families that they may not have been able to reach before the digital age, and really remove the barriers that keep families, especially from underserved communities, from being able to be a participant in their child's learning. And so we've actually, one of those major barriers is language. And we have spent the last 10 years building machine learning models that are essentially like human interpret, like we've got human translation that is helping to improve those models over time. And so we have industry leading translation that can help really reach families that speak over 150 languages. We
That's
use AI,
amazing.
sorry, Ariam. We use AI
No,
in a lot
good.
of other ways as well. And I'm sure we'll get into some of those, but really helping to bring families and schools closer together.
Well, why don't we start there, Stephanie? Just what you mentioned around all the various languages that your models incorporate, and we're talking about stakeholder and community engagement as being core. How do you think that is different in the AI era? So, what specifically about AI? We know that stakeholder and community engagement is important when we think about the of products in educational systems. But what specifically about AI creates new opportunities and also new challenges?
Yeah, I think for me, it comes back to trust. So when anyone uses our product, they are trusting that we are going to essentially connect two ends of a system, right? Of a classroom and a family. And so we have a responsibility. We've always had a responsibility to ensure that that is a trustful relationship. But if AI makes that risky, because there are so many ways that we could erode that trust. And that is
Mm,
the opposite of what we're going to do. And so for us, I really think about AI like we have to be responsible for the outputs. We have to be responsible for those connections. And it makes it easier to do those things and to remove those
Yeah.
barriers like language, like access, like the ability to read, literacy levels, et cetera. But it also, it gives us a responsibility that we have to have with our stakeholders so that we understand how they build that trust, and more importantly, so that we're ensuring not to break it.
Yeah. And I'd love to hear from Sarah. Before we move over to Sarah, just curious, what are those conversations around trust that you're having with families? What specifically are the challenges or issues for them when it comes to AI related to trust, for example, or safety? What's top of mind for them? What's keeping them up at night?
Yeah, I think for us, for the pieces that we've spent a lot of time on is first of all, bringing family voice into the conversation, ensuring that we take the conversations that happen through our platform and
Mhm.
help inform the models based
Yeah,
on those conversations. And so it's really important. So we've given them the ability to say, hey, this isn't right, and to
yeah,
inform us when they find something that isn't correct. We've been able to, really build into the platform ways that families can send that feedback. More
Mm,
importantly, what we've been able to do is to provide them with like a a click in, almost like deeper understanding of the school system, right? Being able to say,
mm,
"Okay, this is like our models, for example, um, we translate the word sub into a substitute teacher. We know it's not a submarine. We know it's not a sandwich, right? And being able to do that really helps to ensure that families understand the message they're receiving. They understand what the school's trying to inform them about. And like I said, we've built in lots of ways that AI can help them to really understand the things that they may not, right? We use a lot of acronyms in education. And so being able to interpret those on the spot, it helps build that trust. We've had families who have come to us and said, oh, I really thought that so and so teacher spoke Bengali, right? Because that's the language
mhm.
they're receiving um, the communication in. So there things like that where we really are able to, remove those barriers.
that's terrific. Sarah, maybe we can go to you and see if there's anything you'd like to build on that, or just from your perspective, what you've seen at PERTS in terms of challenges and opportunities with AI.
Yeah, well, I mean, first, just build on the point about trust. That is
Yeah,
so important. I mean, I think we all just intrinsically care about trust because we're nonprofit do-gooders and so forth. But I mean, there are real substantive issues here. I mean, our platform handles data generated by students,
yeah,
which, FERPA law has not caught up to the AI age. You know what I mean? And so, we're FERPA compliant, but I mean, I think that there's a sensitivity around just not only making sure that our privacy policies and our security practices are ironclad, which we love, but also just making sure we don't create the appearance of any kind of lack of stewardship, or I should say that we appropriately signal our stewardship of that kind of sensitive data.
yeah,
People are getting more critical about privacy and things like that. And I think that's really positive. I'm a parent. I'm very questioning about where my kids' data is going. So, that trust is one piece. And so, coming back to stakeholder engagement, it's
yeah,
really important to know how people are seeing your tool, how people are seeing your protections of their data and so forth. And you really can't know that without user feedback. And then a second thing I want to add, I don't know how much you relate to this, Stephanie, but I kind of had like a paradigm shift myself when we're working on this AI tool. I realized we're not just building UIs anymore. Like we're not just building software. That's hard enough. But we're building like knowledge machines and intelligent agents, right? So that kind of implies a different kind of stakeholder engagement because, I have to ask myself, do I know everything our AI tool needs to know? uh, you know, if not, how do I find the people who know that? How do I get the right data? How do we credit them appropriately, right? So like we're kind of like building these expert systems, and I think you can't do it without talking to and really like getting to know the people who are close to the problems that we're trying to solve.
Yeah, 100%.
That
You
definitely resonates with me, Sarah. I'll bring it back to the point where what you learn from stakeholders has to go back into the model. And so
Mm-hmm.
really being able to not just like learn from them, but to have the model learn from them so that you're continuing to
Yes.
have that feedback loop. And it not only helps the models get better, but it also, like you said, it builds more of that trust and the
Mm,
responsibility for us to be like really, really thinking about the outputs is really like vital.
absolutely.
And we have another fantastic panelist joining us, Mimi Stiles, founder and president of Measure. Mimi, do you want to just take a minute to introduce yourself, Measure, and just how AI integrates with your work?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share. Yeah, Mimi Styles. I get to be the founder and president of this phenomenal research and public education organization. We're based in Austin, Texas, but we work everywhere. Our work really sits at the intersection of redefining what data is and how data is also lived experience, and how powerful it is when you sit with communities and provide them the opportunity to create solutions. And so our work, for the next couple of years, we are charged with interrogating artificial intelligence. What that means is that there's no one better than community who are impacted by the rollout of AI in such a powerful way. There's no one better to interrogate the system than communities themselves. And so we're bringing communities together. As a matter of fact, in just a couple of weeks, we're piloting 13 different communities coming together to look at generative AI outcomes, to poke holes in the robot, to ensure that that we're not just receiving AI outputs, but instead we are creating space for community to speak and to share what is right, what is wrong, what could possibly cause more harm in my community if we do not correct it, what systems, what Gen AI systems, what LLMs could potentially scale harm faster than they're
Mm.
intending to even fix the problem. So
Yeah.
that's sort of the work that we're doing, and it's a framework called Communities in the Loop.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, Mimi. That really ties back so beautifully to what Stephanie and Sarah shared around just what meaningful stakeholder engagement looks like. So again, interrogating those models, making sure that community feedback makes its way back into those models, the trust and privacy aspects that Sarah talked about. You all have very thoughtful approaches, and I'll say, I think we can all agree that, um, the space itself, like, I don't know if there are tons of public, thoughtful processes like you're describing. So I'm curious, maybe we can hear from each of you.
Mm.
You've kinda described what meaningful stakeholder engagement looks like. Like, how did you come to the frameworks and processes that you've designed and used? And what's worked well, and what have maybe been some of the challenges, right? Stakeholder engagement is not necessarily easy at every turn. So tell us a little bit about, like, just again, because I don't think there are great examples necessarily in this space
Mm.
just yet, and you are all sort of, um, uh, sharing some fantastic ways of doing this work. Tell us a little bit about that and just, like, what have been the challenges and what's worked well for you? Maybe we can start with Mimi.
Yeah, definitely. Here's the thing. Communities want to be consulted. They want to know that their lived experience matters. And so what we've learned through Communities in the Loop is that when you create space for community to share and to ask them, and let me just kind of back up for a moment. Many of us are grappling with what does responsible and ethical AI mean
Mm.
right? We're not ever going to get to that answer unless we ask the people that the AI is going to be impacting, right? So at the city level, we're bringing communities together to ask them through town hall conversations, through virtual sessions, how can a city partner with you? How can we roll out a certain technology to whereas you feel honored and still respected? What types of feedback loops do you need in order for us to ensure that this tool that our city is using is not causing undue harm? And so that's what we're seeing with Communities in the Loop. So far, we've been able to have at Measure 3 sessions, over 334 community members locally in Austin, Texas, where we're asking them the same questions about responsible and ethical AI. And then what we're doing is we're creating a space where we're then providing that information to our city, because every city, no matter where you are at right now, you are all asking yourselves the same question: how are we going to implement AI in a way that our constituents feel safe? That's huge right now. But unless you have a framework where you are, Communities in the Loop is a great framework. I would ask everyone to talk about it, think about it, and potentially contact us so we can support you in rolling it out. But bringing those communities together, making sure that you gather those insights. What we do at Measure, we simply do some thematic analysis and provide those insights directly to the city themselves.
Yeah. So it sounds like creating that infrastructure, just infrastructure for folks to be convened and to have the space to speak up, and thoughtfully designing that space is really important. Sarah, I think you had
Oh, I
something to
just wanted to ask a clarifying question. The work that you're describing, Mimi, sounds so interesting. I'm now scheming to see if I can get you to come to my town. But I'm curious,
Yeah.
what kind of, like, would you be willing to share like a couple of examples of like decisions that these conversations inform, just to kind of help me understand like the scope of the work that you're talking about?
Right now, we're being very, very specific with our community in that we need to create a framework for responsible and ethical AI. Many companies, corporations are thinking about what their policy is, right, for AI. So let me just give you a little bit of insight. Before we started these convenings, Measure is a research to local action organization. So we have an advocacy component of it. We pushed for a resolution for the city to ensure that communities are aware of AI technology.
Oh, interesting.
Let me even bring it back a little more, Sarah. I was a whistleblower, right? There was a AI generated phone call in Austin, Texas during a city council meeting. And I called in and I said, Mayor, this is an AI. We have to be very careful. I then went to work and pushed and supported one of our councilwomen to pass what's called Resolution 55. There's not a lot of resolutions right now governing AI at city level. Once we got that passed, that then gave us the green light to start working with our community. And so now it's an initiative called Communities in the Loop. We bring together, communities in safe, sacred spaces in Austin. They're willing to share, where they're comfortable enough to name, what algorithmic harm is and how it has possibly even impacted them before. And with that said, able to provide us insights on what does it mean to feel safe with AI? How can the city successfully partner in a more co-governance framework with you?
Wow, that's so interesting.
It's very good. The first executive brief has been shared publicly. It's on wemeasure.org. It looks like it's in the it's there in the chat. So if anyone is welcome to take a look at that, if they're interested in, you know, in connecting with us at Measure, we would love to walk you through sort of that process, because we know that that AI, and I just was published in Fortune magazine alongside my co-chair, Chris Hines. We both chair the HBCU AI conference at Houston Tillotson University in Austin, and we both have this, you know, humanitarian concern that AI is potentially going to be the greatest level of, you know, could create the greatest level of oppression that historically oppressed communities will ever experience, right? So you're talking about healthcare inequities, you're talking about criminal justice, education, you know, every system that we've had to fight and fight and fight to matter in will be exacerbated, will grow because of the speed and angst of AI. And so the way that we're pushing against the robot is ensuring that communities are empowered. We're empowered. We know that, you know, we don't have to just accept what this, you know, AI has told us who we are, but instead we can also inform the language model itself, and we can also partner with the developers who are creating it on our behalf.
Yeah. I love the community in the loop, just the model, because it's not, you know, feedback by form. That's really not going to work, right? You have to put in the work to actually convene people, create that safe space for them where they really feel like they can be seen and heard, and do that, like you said, in partnership with decision makers like local government. I think that's really such a fantastic model, and again, requires thoughtfulness and work. Maybe we can go over to Stephanie, just building on what Mimi shared. What's worked well for you at Talking Points in terms of, you know, how you've created that space for communities, and what have been maybe some one or two challenges you faced in that process?
Yeah, I would say we've taken our product has taken a more systemic approach to things. So really thinking about how to build features into our product that it enables our stakeholders to give us feedback. And so one example of that is I've got two examples actually. One example is a feature that we call Explain This, and it gives the families the ability to, when they receive a message from a school, to be able to say, I don't quite understand this. And so they can hit Explain This. AI defines the terms and tells them what the message means in their home language and gives them a suggested response, right? So being able to really like think about we know now, right? Because in the back end, what we know is that that original message wasn't getting it done. So what can we do to feed that into the loop so that we next time know how to translate it better, how to ensure that the model knows what is best to, you know, to translate, to be able to define those concepts. We also have as on sort of the other end, from the teacher end, we have given them real agency, right? So being able to see, we have a feature that we call Message Mentor, and essentially it enables teachers to create a message rooted in best practices using AI that kind of resembles if they were to draft a message and then have their mentor read it to make sure it sounded good and it was appropriate and all those good things. And so what we do there is we propose an answer and then give the user agency to say, no, that's not exactly what I meant, or this is not the right approach, and to try again, to be able to keep trying. And again, we know all of that information in the back end and can help feed our model. So really thinking about how we, like, from a systemic point of view, build those tools
Yeah.
into the product so that those feedback loops are happening all the time and we're learning from them all the time.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's just so many unique entry points for your community to really provide that feedback and make its way into the model. That sounds really accessible. That's terrific. Um, maybe I mean, Sarah, do you have anything to add in terms of PERTS and your and it's sort of the way that you all approach this and what's worked well and any challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I guess one thing I could quickly add is just I think we're doing product work. So that makes us different from Mimi, but we're like a lot less far along with our AI offerings than Stephanie. So I think like these kind of feedback loops and things like that, I'm scheming, I'm taking notes. Like this sounds like this is great for vision setting. And like if you're in the audience and you're thinking, well, we're more beginners, that's I can relate to you. And I would say the thing that's worked really well so far has been getting really early input from our stakeholders.
Mhm.
Because I think, everybody's developing our intuitions about AI capabilities and stuff like that. We're all kind of learning together. And we find that like sometimes our users have intuitions about like what our tools could do that we wouldn't think of. So, for example, we were thinking, a lot more in terms of, having a tool that kind of connects people with established resources and things like that. And then our users were telling us, well, hey, why can't it analyze my data for me? And I was just like, that's a great question. Why can't it? And maybe it can, right? So if you're kind of early in the process, I would suggest like having those early design conversations with users just as soon as
Yeah.
possible at the visioning stage.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like that's often the easiest. I mean, in terms of developing a product effectively, especially when we think about cost, right? Getting that feedback early and often is really critical. You don't want to get it when you have a fully formed product and you haven't thought about all of those sort of those inputs in order to make those design decisions. Yeah. I mean, and that takes us back to a question I want to pose to the three of you is, it sounds like you all are developing approaches, models, products where communities, their feedback is actually influencing decisions. It's not simply being acknowledged. But there's probably some negotiation that has to happen there, right? Because depending on the type of inputs or feedback and how much feedback you get, um, everything might not make it in. So curious, like for each of you, what have you observed or seen or been a part of, or what processes do you have in place to kind of negotiate what actually makes it back into your products, your programming, and just your frameworks. And
Can
maybe we could start with Mimi or whoever is there anyone who's like
yeah,
burning to get to that? Yeah.
yeah, I'm burning up, girl, because I thank you for that question. For us, let me just start. Let me answer it short because I want to give you some context to why I'm answering it short. At
Mhm.
Measure, every single bit of feedback matters. Every word, every sentence, every utterance, every pain that has been
Hmm.
experienced because of algorithmic harm. And I understand algorithmic harm deeply.
Hmm.
Every one, so much of the conversations that I'm in every single day about ethical AI really focuses on technical remedies like
Mhm.
improving data quality, like increasing transparency, or many of y'all have heard several times over, inserting the human in the loop. Let me tell you the problem with the human in the loop. And I got to be very careful when I say that out loud because people are like, wait, what do you mean there's a problem with human in the loop? While these types of interventions are definitely useful, what they don't examine or what they don't address is really that more fundamental question
Yeah,
of who holds
that's right.
power over the system when the
Exactly.
harm appears? Who is
Hmm.
authorized to
Yeah.
question the system? Whose knowledge counts, right?
Hmm.
As people, and when is that intervention even allowed to occur? And so,
Hmm.
why critical that every single bit, with talking points, I mean, y'all know this, right? Every bit of that data, that very rich, beautiful, lived experience data matters. It's because it's because we need. So I call it my theory of interrogative reasoning, or
Mm.
IR,
Hmm.
interrogative. And again, at its core, it asks these very deceptively simple questions, but the problem is, Ariam, is that no one is asking them, right? Like,
Yeah,
again, who's close enough to the harm to recognize it
that's
early
right.
on and name it quickly? Who is believed when the evidence of harm is actually presented? And when are those people with the
Yeah,
necessary access to actually shape or push back or redirect the system, when are they invited to the loop? So
yeah,
the problem with human in the loop is that humans are inherently problematic, and we bring all of our biases, and so we're going to throw that one person in the loop, right, to try to manage all of these agents. It's humans,
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
right? Community,
100%.
plural,
And
in the
it
loop.
Yeah, and also thinking about the application of the technology, right? When we think about the social sector and the implications, folks who don't have any sort of like historical or, sociological context around some of the ways in which technology, has shown up in certain sectors and communities. I mean, it's unacceptable, right? Because they're operating from a place of just not having any type of knowledge or, like you said, Mimi, any lived experience. Um, this has been such a rich conversation. I wanna Stephanie and Sarah, did you have anything to add to that before I go to our last question and then we go into our Q&A?
I will just say +1, Mimi, to everything that you're saying. Absolutely. The keyword I think that I honed in on, that you were just talking about, is transparency also. I think it's
Mm,
so vital that it's very
Mhm.
clear what decisions are being made and who is making them and what is driving the why behind those decisions. And so being
Mm.
really transparent about what AI is doing, what it's not doing, I think is vital in these circumstances.
Well, yeah, and one thing that's really surfacing for me, I had in my notes, try to like, because when I'm thinking about a product, I'm not necessarily thinking about these societal level issues, except to make sure I'm not inserting them into the product, right? But I mean, I have kind of a narrower scope. But kind of a perennial problem in user research is making sure you're not just talking to like one group of users, right? That you're not just preaching, talking to the choir, as you might say. And that really, like the way you put it kind of at a society level, I guess just really highlights the importance of that. Like, are we talking to a representative sample of our users? Are we making sure that we talk to, you know, people that aren't in positions of power? That's in some ways, I mean, logistically, it's kind of an easy problem to solve. Like, you just have to solve it. But yeah, that really that yeah, that really crystallized for me. So thank you.
yeah, and I'll just wrap that up with, really, as you've all highlighted, it's not just about the how in terms of, how do we center community, right, in the loop, and they're in terms of stakeholder engagement, but like the who, right? Who? Are we
Yeah.
really thinking about who, right? Are we doing the work to figure that out and make sure the right people are in the
Mm,
room?
mm.
Um, I really wanna get to our Q&A, but I wanna like a rapid fire 1 round really quick, from each of you. Just what's one piece of advice? We have a lot of incredible people who are tuning into this session. Some who are trying to build AI-based programming, products, interventions. What's one piece of advice you might give them, give to this audience that you wish that you had had when you were developing your frameworks, models, products, and programs? Is there anything specifically you're like, "I wish I had known this," or, "I wish I had been exposed to this resource," or, "I wish I had had this?" And maybe we can, whoever would like to start first.
Yeah, I can definitely start. And I'll say it super quick, Ariam. I promise. There's two things actually. Sorry,
Go for
I
it.
try really hard with the rule. So number one is that proximity is critical for ethical insight,
Yeah.
right? When we talk about
Hmm.
those humans in the loop, they are the closest to see harm
It's true.
before
It's
it
a really
scales. So proximity have to be that if we're talking about, yeah, so proximity, it's not anecdotal whatsoever. It's a form of expertise. That's number one. And then number two, if I can just add this one, is that, and how do I say, so belief is a gatekeeper of influence.
Hmm.
So we can work with communities all day long, but if their feedback is not believed, and if it's not believed at a certain time where they can actually influence the loop, then it is all for naught. They can see harm clearly. They can see harm responsibly
Hmm.
and still be ignored. I've seen it. I've been that. I've experienced it. And so, these are the concerns that we're working through at Measure through interrogative reasoning, through our tooling that we're building, and hopefully we'll create a better AI system in the end.
Love that. Thank you for sharing that, Mimi.
I can go next, Ariam. I
Yeah.
think for me, I know I've talked about this a little bit, but building when you think about your product and what you're going to offer, really thinking about building those feedback loops into the system itself. And
Yeah.
we
Mhm.
talked about already, but really thinking that through from the very
Yeah.
beginning, I think is crucial, right? How are you going to ensure that your feedback is getting back to your models? And so, really, like, that's the one thing. If you're out there wondering, like, how am I gonna do this? There's so much changing so quickly about the technology. Think about your stakeholders and what they're going to need in order to be able to keep giving you that feedback.
Yeah. Thank you, Stephanie. And Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, I would plus one so much. I wrote students are the closest to see harm on my notes that I'm gonna like put it on my computer or something. I think that's really true, and it's a really good thing to keep in mind. And yeah, feedback loops are so important. There's so much valuable data, so I just plus one both of you. And I think what I might add is kind of like almost a push in the not in the opposite direction, but in kind of like the direction of, I feel like this is a moment to not be afraid to think big, because it's easier to learn than it used to be in some ways. We learn from our users to kind of expand our vision of what is possible. And I think that like sometimes if you don't feel like, you don't feel competent in a tech context, or you don't feel like this is really your forte, you can be like timid about AI. And I do think that, that's not to say don't be careful. Be careful with privacy. Be careful with people's job security, with asking anyone to take on risks. Like those are the things not to be, those are the things to be timid about. But in terms of like, because I just think that somebody's going to have big visions. And if it's not people who really care about students and teachers and families and communities, then we want to be having visions too. So I think big would be my piece of advice.
Thanks so much for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, I think just to sum it all up, and synthesize that, really thinking about, proximity to community and really valuing what communities are actually sharing, right? And making sure that that is central to whatever we design, and then creating those, creating, whether it's a product, a program, a model, where are communities in that design loop, right? How are they central to it? It's not like, we create something and then we go back to them. Like, how do we actually immerse them in it in a thoughtful, a really thoughtful and effective way. We have
And
time.
Ariam,
Uh-huh.
just to say too, it's a lot. It's a
Yeah,
lot to do it the right way. Measure
that's
has
right.
had 10 years of
That's right.
practice. Okay. And so
Yeah.
we've been doing it for about 10 years. I did just want to mention, we are partnered with over 132 organizations right now, walking them through that process. We're always willing to share. So I just want to throw that out there. If there's ever something, it is a conscious effort to do it right, because if we don't do it right, we can ourselves cause harm in the process of doing it. So just want to mention.
Absolutely. And it's not something that AI can or should automate, right? This is about humans building human infrastructure. And to your point, it's hard work and we have to be willing to do it. And we have to be willing to put the resources required into creating those spaces. So I just thank you all so much for sharing that piece of feedback. I think that's going to be really helpful for the audience. We're going to open it up for one question. Let's see if we have any questions coming through. And then we are going to close and shift to our lounge space. But let's see if we have any questions coming through. Okay. Let's go with this one maybe. This is from Chris. What lessons from your experience would you recommend on how to ensure ongoing trust when stakeholder community groups might have ebbing, flowing doubts, fears about foundational AI chatbots or companies upon which many nonprofit custom tools are built? Anyone
Yeah,
want to take that?
yeah.
Yeah.
Two things for me. So the tools that the AI is trained on is important. The training data is critical. One thing that we're doing at Measure is we're thinking very thoughtfully on what does it mean for our communities to create our own training data that is embedded in interrogative reasoning, that's also generated by communities for communities. So it's like going to the grocery store. You can go get regular apples or you can get organic apples. Well, at Measure, you can partner with us and get organic apples to train your model, right? So we know it's healthy and free of pesticides, right? And so that for us, that's one. That's one way, is knowing we have to be very, very clear on what did we use in order to train this tool. We have a tool called the AIT tool. It's a framework that we've developed, okay, created by our community, all women, okay, and that matters, okay, for us. And we can walk a organization through this AIT tool to really understand, should we use this tool for our organization or not? How was the training of this tool? How was the building of this tool really embed, making sure that it's a public interest technology? If it's not a PIT, a public interest technology, I would tell you now, those organizations that are thinking about how do we adopt these systems, to stay far away from it.
Yeah, I love that emphasis on, digital sovereignty. I really do think I agree in that. I think that's really the future when we're thinking about, building AI systems that are actually allow the public to flourish. I think that's truly going to be the future, and that people are taking the development of, data and models into their own hands. Stephanie or Sarah, any way you would want to respond to that question?
I think at Talking Points, we are really thinking about the testing too, right? The quality assurance of outputs and the inputs, right? We're making sure that we're really considering that. So being transparent with your community and your stakeholders about what you're doing, I think it's a step at least in the right direction. We talked about transparency a lot, I think, today, but making sure that you're doing the testing and making sure that you are being transparent about what you've tested and maybe what you've not been able to. And so setting those expectations. I think for us as a nonprofit, we've been really proud of the work that we've done to create custom models in the same fashion that Mimi's talking about, right? Like we're training our models. And so thinking about how you can do that and be really open about what that looks like.
Yeah. Terrific. Sarah, maybe our closing thought.
That would be great. I got really into both of these answers and I forgot the question. Can I hear the question again?
Sure. I think the question was, how do we ensure let's see. Okay, I've lost it. I mean, I think the question is like, how do we ensure that, um, what lessons from your experience, would you recommend on how to just ensure ongoing trust, when community groups might have like doubts or fears about these foundational AI models and products and companies, right? There is distrust and fear, right? So, what are lessons that you might share around how to ensure ongoing trust, building ongoing trust?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess maybe the one thing I would layer on to what's already been said is, the kind of remaining value of like face-to-face relationships with people, even if maybe they're mediated by Zoom. But it's really different to hear about, an AI tool offered by PERTS, this abstract organization, versus like, knowing someone from PERTS who's your kind of contact there, who's talking with you about it, who you have some kind of trust and accountability with. So, I mean, I think that we can scaffold around those human relationships and we can build more robust pipelines for gathering information, but like we still need to have those. So maybe that's the one thing I would layer on.
Terrific. Well, I want to just say a big thanks to Sarah, Mimi, and Stephanie for sharing your experiences and work in such rich and thoughtful detail. Just like what a remarkable set of people, and thank you for all the work that you're doing in this really critical space that ensures that like these AI systems will truly actually work for everyone. Um, I wanted to also share that there's been a lot of demand to keep this community that's been formed by Project Evident today going, to potentially form a learning community, and so that the community can continue to share out about AI in the social sector and nonprofit space. So look out for further communications from the Project Evident team. And now I'm going to encourage folks to join our fantastic panelists in the lounge to just learn more from them in the time that we have. So thank you, everyone. Thanks so much for joining.